So for the instrumental variable for this actual um, subsidy valuation that households receive from the state, the authors are going to use a change in the subsidy precipitated by the National Food Security Act that was implemented in 2013 across India. So, what the National Food Security Act or NFSA stipulated that every state must give out the grains, wheat or rice at 2 rupees per kg, um, and it must give out certain minimum quantity. So say 5 kilo or 6 kilo per individual per month. Okay? And now various states prior to 2013 had different amounts of this. So in both in terms of price, the price at which they were selling these grains at the fair price shops, as well as the quantity allocation ration for every individual as stipulated by the state. So basically the state after 2013 had to sort of match up at least to the level that was stipulated by the central government, but also could do better. They could charge an even lower price than 2 rupees if that's possible, uh, um, and or allocate more than 5 kilo per person per month. Okay, so that's sort of so the state could sort of go beyond the stipulation, but they had to sort of match up to the stipulation. Now, what the authors are going to do, they're going to look at pre 2013 amounts in terms of both in terms of rupees, the price and the quantity, and they're going to look at how much the state had to change because of the stipulation after 2013. So that gives them state by state increase in entitlement, increase in the value of the subsidy that the government forces them to allocate, right? So the higher the price was before the higher the price of the fair price shop grain was before this 2013 NFSA, the greater will be the change in the subsidy amount, right? So now suppose it was say 4 rupees before for a particular state, suppose it was 4 rupees per kilo, now it has to be 2 rupees. So now there is an additional 2 rupees subsidy that each individual is getting for every kilo of grain that they purchase, okay, from the fair price shop. If it was 5 rupees, then the the change in the subsidy was now 3 rupees per kilo, right? And you multiply it by the change in the quantity precipitated by the NFSA, then that gives you the total change in the entitlement, the total change in the subsidy value, right? So you can calculate subsidy value pre NFSA, you can calculate subsidy value post NFSA, and for every state, this pre and post would be different, leading to different changes. Okay? And that change they're going to use. Now, how come that sort of helps us get an instrument? So why we are talking about instrumental variable here? Because of the following thing. So what they're going to do is they're going to first calculate this total value of subsidy that the individuals are receiving. So this value of subsidy, as you can imagine, say for rice, that's the first term. So it's the quantity stipulated by the state government, right? So that's the PDS rice that's stipulated, multiplied by the difference between market price. So this is the average market price across all individuals within the state, right? So that's constant. So they have data for market. Market prices can vary across households within a state, right? Because they live in different villages which have different access to shops, etc. So the prices could be different. So the authors kind of average the price out, the market price across all individuals within a state. So they get a constant market price, and they deduct the PDS price, the fair price shop, to calculate the per kilo subsidy that the individuals are getting, those who are accessing the PDS, those who are buying the PDS rice. So if you multiply it by the amount that each household gets, you get the total value of the subsidy for rice, and you can do it for wheat as well. And so if you sum it up, you get the total value, total monetary value of the subsidy that each household is getting. Now the point is that at 2013 this changed, right? The price of the PDS price changed, and so did the quantity, right? Now the problem is, or the not every state changed the price and the quantity to the stipulated amount exactly in 2013. They took some time, right? So that's the first. Second, when they did change, whether on time or later, some states actually increased the stipulation, went beyond the stipulation of the central government. So they reduced the price even further, or they increased the amount beyond that was stipulated, right? Now, so the actual change in the transfer of the subsidy is different from the what the change would be if every state followed the NFSA guidelines perfectly, right? And now the problem is, even if there was an NFSA that came in 2013, their argument is that the change in the actual transfer can still be endogenous. Why? Because one, the different state sort of changed at different points in time. Not everybody changed in 2013, and that's endogenous. Some states are delaying it because of political concerns, etc., which could be correlated with labor market outcomes of households. So therefore, that's the endogeneity. Second is, even the amount of change. The states that choose to go beyond the stipulated amount, that also is endogenous, right? That's endogenous again to state-specific unobservable factors that can affect labor market outcomes. So the actual value of the transfer as a function of time is endogenous. So what they're going to do, they're going to use the stipulated amount, the amount of the transfer that is stipulated by NFSA, as a predictor of the actual. Okay, so to motivate this, let's look at this graph. So this is plotting the state-wise price of rice, and you see that after 2013, so sorry, I said it wrong. I said it's 3 rupees. So I said the price should be 2 rupees. The target price is actually 3 rupees per kg for rice. So this is the target. So that's what it says, target. So for example, Bihar was selling the rice in the PDS shops at 7 rupees per kg. Now in 2013, so that's when NFSA came in. They should have reduced it to 3 rupees, but they didn't. They took some time, so they changed in 2014. So next year. So next year they only went down to the stipulated amount. But if you look at MP was 4.5 rupees, and it changed to 2 rupees, so that it went below, and then a year later it went further below to 1 rupee. Okay. Similarly, Karnataka was at the stipulated amount of 3 rupees, and then it went below to 1 rupee after NFSA, even though they didn't have to, because they are already at 3 rupees, but they reduced it even further. Okay, and same for Odisha. So Odisha also was below the stipulated amount. It was already selling it at 2 rupees, but then it reduced, even before the NFSA came in, it reduced it to 1 rupee. Now these kinds of changes, either before or after NFSA, and the amount of change, these are all endogenous. These are driven by state-specific calculations, what the politicians in power thought at that time to be desirable, right? And that's again correlated with unobservable factors of the state that can affect labor market outcomes. So if you use the actual transfer value using these actual changes in price, then that would be an endogenous still endogenous, even if you want to use the NFSA Act. This is what the line would look like if all states followed the NFSA stipulation. So Bihar would have come here, Maharashtra would have come here, MP would have come here, all in 2013. Those who are staying below would have stayed below because they are already meeting the NFSA criterion. They would not have changed. For example, Odisha here actually changed. This is saying if they followed the NFSA guidelines, since Odisha didn't have to change, Odisha wouldn't change. So basically, this is a sort of a simulated transfers. This is the simulated price from which they're going to calculate a simulated transfer if the states followed the NFSA guidelines to its T. Okay. For example, Karnataka was already at the target, so Karnataka is not changing at all. Okay, it's constant. So what they're going to use is this as an instrument for this. So they want to find out the effect of, so these are prices from which you can compute the T. So whenever I'm looking, when I'm saying effect of this on labor market, I'm basically referring to the implied value of transfer given these subsidized prices. So these subsidized prices, these are actual subsidized prices from which you can compute the actual transfer value for every state for every year. This is the simulated prices for rice, and that would imply a different transfer value for every state, and that's the variable that they're going to use. So that's the simulated one. This they're going to use as an instrumental variable for this. The idea being that for states which has a higher simulated transfer post NFSA would also have a higher actual transfer post NFSA, even though they may be delaying by a year or maybe doing more. But if you compare across states, they should be positively correlated. And that's the first criteria of IV, if you remember. The second criteria is that exclusion restriction, the fact that the variation in the simulated transfers should not be correlated with unobservable factors that would affect the outcome, or the simulated transfer should not have a direct effect on labor market outcome, and that's reasonable. Why? Because the changes in NFSA was because of some arbitrary prices and quantities stipulated by the state, by the central government, and therefore that implied a kind of some change for every state depending on what their pre-NFSA levels were, and that change was exogenous because these sort of stipulations are kind of arbitrarily set, right? So that argument is a validation of or in favor of the exclusion restriction that allows them to use the simulated NFSA implied transfers as an instrument for the actual transfer. Okay. Now, the previous graph was for prices. The same is true for quantity. So the valuation, the subsidy value is calculated using both difference in market and PDS price as well as the stipulated quantity. So the actual quantity is also changing, right? The actual quantity is it should be all 5 kilo per person per month. So for example, Bihar should increase. Bihar was lower. It was 4 kilo, it should have increased to 5 kilo in 2013. If you see here, Bihar doesn't change even at 2013, it goes to 5 kilo only in 2014, a year later. Similarly, Andhra Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, they also delay. And in case of Andhra, they are sort of increasing it even further. Karnataka was below, it was 4.5 kilo, but it sort of shoots above the target to more than 6 kilo, it goes to 6.5. Okay. Jharkhand doesn't change, Odisha doesn't change, and Gujarat doesn't change. Notice Gujarat should have changed, right? Because the NFSA Act stipulates it to increase. So in the instrumental variable where you are calculating the simulated quantity, you are applying the rule basically. So you are saying what it would look like if everybody follows the rule to its exact specification. So then Gujarat would also change, Bihar would, and AP and MP would also change, but change it to exact to the target level in 2013 and stay there. So again, this is used, and this basically, this quantity and this price is used to calculate the TNFSA, and this, the actual change in the actual prices and the actual quantities are used to calculate T actual, and this T NFSA is an instrument for T actual, right? So I'm just, the graph, these two graphs show the two components of the T, quantity and price separately. So if you take them together, what you get is basically this entitlement. So this is the plot of the T. So the T is basically in rupees per month. So this is 600 rupees say per month, and that, these entitlements, that's the aggregate entitlement T, that is changing for different states at different point in time. That's the actual one. If it followed the NFSA rule perfectly, then they all would have went up and remained there. Notice, there is variation in the post NFSA values. That's because the market prices are different in the state. So even though everybody is hitting 3 rupees per kilo price, and everybody is hitting 5 kilo per person per month quantity, the implied value of the transfer is different in the post, and that's because the market prices were different. So the difference gives you different levels of subsidy even in the post period, right, across these states. So that's what the authors are going to use as an instrument for this. Okay. So what is the first stage? The first stage is they have this transfer value, simulated one based on NFSA stipulations, and the actual transfer value. So they're going to regress actual on NFSA to get the predicted value of the actual. What would be the actual value of transfer predicted by NFSA, controlling for this? So individual specific factors and time specific factors. So because the actual regression has individual specific outcomes, which is labor supply and wage, market wage. So basically you want to regress your labor market outcomes, labor supply and wage, on the actual, but instead of the actual transfer, you use the predicted transfer predicted from the first stage regression. So basically, so this regression will predict a beta hat, and so for given the beta hat, for every value of TNFSA, you get the T predicted actual, and you plug that, and then you regress the T predicted actual on the labor market. What are these alpha and lambda? So alpha I is the individual level fixed effect for every, because it's a panel data, it's tracking every individual over time, which sort of encompasses the implementation of the NFSA. You are putting the individual fixed effect, meaning that you are putting a dummy for every individual, because you can track the same individual. So you're going to compare basically you want to compare the same individual over time, and the way to do that, you sort of look, you difference out all individual specific differences across people. So then every individual is kind of identical to begin with, and then you make the comparison. Is it the case that more higher value of subsidy predicted by change in NFSA, pause the individual, the same individual in this period, post period, to change the labor supply or receive a different wage. Okay. Lambda T is another fixed effect, but it's for every. So this is the monthly data. For every month there is a fixed effect. Okay. Meaning that all, there could be variation across months. Some months, because there are seasonality, so you want to make comparison over time meaningful. To get rid of seasonality, you put month fixed effect. So all variations across months, that are taken care of. So basically, your comparison over time is meaningful, because you are sort of removing all these time specific variations in the sample. So this is the sort of chain of events. Uh, um, the target NFSA. So this is the T NFSA. So this is that simulated, value of transfer. So NFSA target transfer or entitlement does. So this is yeah. So it's doing for quantity, price, and actual calculated transfer separately. So the target value or the simulated value predicts the actual value, right? So if you look at column 3, the targeted value of transfer, if it increases by 1 rupee, the actual transfer also increases by 0.78 rupees. Okay, so they are positively correlated. So that's the sort of is the first stage, so to speak. This one is the first stage. And then it's checking whether PDS entitlement increases actual consumption. Okay? And there also you find positive effect. So what does that mean? It means that there is there is an T actual. So this is the T actual. T actual could also be different from for particular individual. They may not consume everything, right, up to the 5 kg. Maybe that person only consuming 4 kg from the 5 kg quota, or they are consuming more. They're consuming 6 kg, 5 of which come from the PDS, 1 kilo you're buying from the market. Okay, so aggregate consumption or your average price that you are paying or your total quantity that your consumption, these things could be different from what you're entitled to get from PDS, because you can either buy less than the entitled amount or you can buy extra from the market, right? So you want to see at an individual level, is it the case that if you have greater entitlement from the PDS in terms of grain amount or the price or the transfer that you get, does that correlate with the actual consumed transfer or consumed amount or the price of the consumed food grain, and that's positive. So the greater is the entitlement, for example, PDS entitlement in subsidy value, the greater is your actual subsidy that you enjoy in terms of the actual purchase of stuff. Okay? So it is indeed the case that if you change the target, you change the actual entitlement at the state level, and at the actual entitlement changes at the state level, that also changes at the individual levels enjoyment of that transfer in a positive way. Okay, so that's a sort of chain of events. So now you want to use PDF entitlement as a and use NFSA target as an instrument. Okay? NFSA target transfer as an instrument for this transfer value. To look at labor market supply. So what is this? What is the outcome variable? The outcome variable is number of days that you have worked as an agricultural laborer for in a given month, right? So it's a monthly data. So in every month they collect this data, and what you get is that if the predicted value of transfer, PDS transfer, does reduce the labor supply. So what is this quantity? So every rupee, so this is in rupee value, every additional rupee of predicted transfer via PDS reduces market supply of labor by 0.0063 days per month. So that means, in other words, 100 rupees of transfer reduces about 0.6 days per month. So in a year, for 100 rupees of transfer in a year, it would reduce about 7 days. Okay. So that's the extent. So the volume of labor supply reduction is not that great, but it is statistically significant. And if you put in all these kinds of trends, so state specific trends or village trends, even then the result is robust. If anything, the coefficient actually increases with more stringent specification. Okay. Okay. What is the effect of market wage? Again, market wage is for every month. You what you have is what is your daily wage rate. So the mean for the sample is about 220 rupees per day across all the states, and an additional rupee of PDS transfer actually increases the wage by 0.19 rupees, or 100 rupees of PDS transfer increases wage by 19.5 rupees on a mean of 227 rupees. So that's a pretty large increase, right? If you remember the increase in total entitlements, if I can go back to this entitlement number, if you see the entitlement went from about 300 to bit above 400 for many states. So it's, the change in entitlement due to NFSA was of that order of in sort of in 100 or 100 rupees or a bit more. Okay, so that's why I'm thinking in terms of 100 rupees. So for that change, 100 rupees, let's say, it would have increased the market wage by 20 rupees on a mean of 227 rupees. So that's a sizable increase. So that's about 10% increase in market wage. So it reduces labor supply by only 0.63 days, but it increases market wage by 20 rupees per day, right? So this change in subsidy value by about 100 rupees. And so you can imagine it had an enormous additional increase in wage income, right? Because they're reducing labor supply by only a tiny amount, but they're getting wage on a higher wage otherwise. So the wage income, if you multiply, is going up by a lot. So that's sort of is the main point of this analysis, that it can have this additional effect on income, which is sort of goes beyond the social safety net. So social safety net is supposed to deliver some kind of subsidy to people, but what it is saying is that because it has an effect on labor supply, people are withdrawing a little bit from the labor, but that has a sort of significant impact on wage. Now you may wonder, why is it that such a tiny change in labor supply is leading to such a large increase in wage? That's because the change is concentrated in for certain sectors and for certain, and everybody is benefiting from it. So so before going there, this is just saying that the change in the labor supply is only coming from the market labor supply. They have also data from household labor supply, how much hours of work you do within the household, and then there is no such change. All the change is in outside labor. Okay, so which is sort of expected. Okay, this is the sort of the original effect, the first two columns. That's the total, that's the fall in labor supply and increase in wages. Now what they're doing is they're segmenting this labor supply and wage by non-farm and farm. So what is the non-farm? Non-farm basically is non-agricultural labor supply and agricultural labor supply. And there what you find is all the labor supply effect is concentrated in non-farm, right? So it's the non-agricultural labor that is getting shrinked. So people are working less away from farm. So, and the idea being that people tend to, in rural areas, tend to work outside the farm only when they need extra money. So these are the people who, are working outside farm because they need to get extra money to ensure that they have enough to eat for everybody. But the moment this sort of there is increase in entitlement, they kind of withdraw their labor from there, and that's where the you see the wages going up by a lot, by 25 rupees, okay, for every 100 rupees increase in transfer. What is interesting is that the labor supply reduction in the agricultural farms That's, there's pretty much zero effect, but you see the wages going up by 8 rupees. Okay, so that's curious, and that is actually, that's another aspect of the general equilibrium effect, and that's because if people are withdrawing from the non-farm sector, that is now paying higher wages, right, to attract non-farm, to attract labor to the non-farm, because there's a supply shortage relative to before. So now that the non-farm wage has gone up, now agricultural laborer may be interested in going to work in the non-farm sector because the wages have gone up. So the farm sector now would have to increase in wage to maintain their labor, right? So in equilibrium, you may see that the labor supply and equilibrium labor supply in the farm, in the agricultural farm, may not be changing, but you see wage going up just to sort of match up to the increase in non-farm sector, to stop the agricultural farm laborers to migrate to non-farm sector, right? So that's the interesting part, right? So even the people who are working in it as agricultural laborer are gaining from this, because the non-farm wage has gone up. If you look at it by gender, most of the effect is driven by the men, right? Because it's the men who are working, who are working in the non-farm sector, going out and working in various other sectors to earn this extra money, and they are the ones who are pulling away their labor and enjoying this greater income due to higher wages. Okay, so all this is driven by the men. This is the final slide. So here, there again, sort of bifurcating this labor supply effect into now different kinds of land holding of the households, rather than looking at gender or the sort of destination sector where they're working. They are now using household characteristics. Are the household landed households or not landed households? So basically they are sort of looking at two subsamples. One is landless and small farmers, so those who own small piece of land, and medium and large farmers. And again, what you find is that it's driven by the smaller guys, the guys who are the needier ones, right? So those who are landless or small farms, they are the ones who work in the non-farm sector, and those are the ones who are reducing their labor supply. Again, it's same for, it's similar result, looking at expenditure quartiles. So if you look at the bottom two quintiles, sorry, not a quartile, it's a bottom two quintiles. Again, the effect is concentrated there. There is no effect in the top two quintiles. So it's not the richer households that are driving this, actually the poorer households that are driving this. So this effect is much larger. The welfare implication is much larger for the poorer sections of the society, who are exactly the direct beneficiaries of this safety net program. So it's sort of a nice result that this benefit that is initially generally targeted to the poorer people are the ones who are withdrawing labor, and they are the ones who are now enjoying higher wages, right? So they are the ones who are sort of doubly benefiting from this program. And again, if you look at by caste group, it is driven by the scheduled castes and the backward, the OBCs, and not driven by the general. So this is the heterogeneity analysis of this treatment effect. So the treatment here is PDS, and the way it's estimated is using instrumental variable, using the sort of simulated value of the transfer, computed using the rules of the transfer, exact rules of the transfer, to predict the actual value of the transfer, and to test whether increment in the predicted transfer actually changes labor supply and wages. And so that's the sort of chain of events. And then this is sort of heterogeneity analysis of that effect across various subsamples based on the nature of the work, farm, non-farm, gender, caste, as well as household characteristics such as landed households or poorer households versus landless households or poorer households versus landed households or richer households, right? And the effect seems to be concentrated on the bottom section of the society. So that, there is sort of this is sort of different from the cash versus in-kind debate. This is saying that even in-kind transfer, which are sort of can be more inefficient, etc., can have these kinds of additional benefits in terms of labor market outcomes. They can earn higher wages just because they have more money, so they can choose to not work and increase the wage collectively. Okay? So let me stop here. Yeah, on Thursday, we're going to discuss about various implications of this paper and sort of talk about the assigned reading, which talks about a cash transfer program. So see you on Thursday.